Hello and welcome to the Mandatory Quarantine Show. Today is day 7. We're halfway through all of the fun that's happening. And tomorrow morning we're going to be doing our PCR checks for the second one. I'm not outside today because it is very rainy. In terms of this afternoon, it's just been pouring down. So because of that, I wasn't able to get out to the gazebo very easily. So we're inside at the moment. Mum came by this morning, dropped off some more groceries, got some Timbits, got a cup of coffee, so that was very nice. Beth and I had breakfast this morning, did a full pancake thing. It's Sunday here in Canada, so pancakes and maple syrup and all that sort of fixings. Everything's going pretty good. No symptoms to report, nothing on that. I got a book review for everybody today. The Fever, let's put it towards the camera. The Fever of 1721, the epidemic that basically led to the whole revolution in sort of this. And this is about by Stephen Cross, this is about the smallpox epidemic that happened in the Americas inside of 1721. So that's even before the foundation of the U.S. as its own separate country. This is during the colonial period. And there's a name that comes up quite often in this, and that's Franklin. And it's not Benjamin Franklin, it's James Franklin, who wrote a bunch of newspaper articles about how inoculation was such a horrible thing and that nobody should ever get inoculated. And it's interesting because fighting for science and reason on the other side was Colin Mather. And for those of you that are familiar with history, especially in the American colonies, you might have heard of the Salem witch trials, in which Colin Mather also appears quite a bit inside of that. Well, after that whole situation with the Salem witch trials, he went off and was one of the proponents of inoculation, which was a brand new technology within the colonies at this time, in which they were doing smallpox inoculation. And it's interesting, especially here, because we like to think that, the civilized society of the Englishmen and the Western culture and all of this. But the way that they came about inoculation was actually from the slaves. It was from Africans that there was tribes inside of Africa that were doing this practice and found that it wasn't inside of there. And this is another piece of what led to the whole hesitancy of doing inoculation in the original American colonies and inside of the politics of this was that, it was considered this untested, untried technology of this other culture inside of it. And so it gets into a lot of the processes that they used in the colonies in terms of the quarantining of ships and putting them off. It goes into the politics in the colonies at the time and what they did in order to prevent the spread of the smallpox that was moving through those areas and destroying those areas. And really, we can see the same sort of actions that we see today, that there was a shutdown in terms of like government business, everybody fled, there was social distancing. All of these manners were inside of there, and there was really the same sort of political community and commentary about it. However, a lot of it was having to do with, inoculation hesitancy, and that there was issues here. And they were going after these doctors where it was like, well, only one person, maybe died out of the hundreds that they inoculated, and it was with smallpox. And they said, well, that doctor should be blamed for it because they had given them the inoculation. Meanwhile, about 40% of the population is getting it and dying from smallpox in the area. So it's like, okay, so that one we at least have someone to blame. But the ones that are being, hit randomly by it, well, nobody to blame there, so we can't control it or do anything. So again, it's very interesting to go back and look at the history of these types of things and get a sense of some of the same arguments that you see today in terms of the hesitancy were there in 1721 during the smallpox epidemic, and that there was the same sort of media frenzy about it, and that those that were actually following the science and the technology at the time including a priest, which is the weird bit. Those that were actually following the science and technology at the time, who were laying this out, were vilified for their actions in terms of it, because it was just considered this weird outside thing. So that's 1721. So when people say, well, this is untested technology, here in 2021, I don't know what to tell you. 300 years of doing this. 300 years of dealing with this sort of thing inside of North America, at least, and definitely beforehand. So that's my thoughts for this weekend. Bit of a book if you want to get into it. It is The Fever of 1721 by Stephen Koss. Noir. Show the cover again. And very good book. And if you can find one, take a read. And as always, stay safe and wash your hands.